making this Memento Mori artwork that you can see here. If you're not familiar with Memento Mori, you can find out more in the description below. I've left a link to an article that we have on the Vault Editions website. Also in the description below you'll find a link to a sample pack with all the images that I have used to make this artwork, and if you download them and open them up in Photoshop, we can get started making this artwork together. The first thing that we're going to do is separate the artwork from the background. Actually, the first thing we're going to do, just to make sure that we're all working with the same interface, is just in Photoshop go Window, Workspace, and just click on Essentials or Reset Essentials, just to make sure that we're all seeing the same thing. Okay, now to separating the image from the background. For engravings, the quickest way I have found to do this, and the most efficient way, is to just go Select, go to Color Range, make sure that Invert is selected, and you'll click on the white part of the image, and because it's inverted, it's going to select everything that is black. So let's do that. Okay, and what we're going to do is create a new layer by clicking on this icon here. We will make sure that black is our backfill color, and you can check that by pressing X and D on the keyboard, and you want to make sure that black is in the background there. And what we'll do is press Command Delete or Control Delete if you're using a PC, and then we'll press Command D, which will deselect the selection, and then you'll be able to see that we have separated the background from the image of this engraving of a rose here. So that can now be moved around and none of the background is attached to it, which is what we want. So let's go ahead and do that for all of the other images before we get started bringing all these different elements together to create the artwork. So I'll just go over this one more time. So select, color range, clicking on the white part of the image. Also, I'll just state too that you want to make sure that your fuzziness is at 200. Press OK, create a new layer, Command Delete or Command Backspace, and that's again Control if you're using a PC. And then to deselect this selection here, Command D, and then we'll see that we can now turn off the background and this image is completely separated. So go ahead and do that for all the other images that were in the sample pack, and then once that's completed, we will start bringing together these elements into our main canvas. Our images have been separated from the background. Let's go ahead and create our new canvas so that we can start to bring all of these different elements together and create our artwork. So I'm just going to change this to millimeters for a second, and I am going to have it be 420 by 570. I'm going to make sure that the color mode is RGB, and this is all in millimeters. Okay, so I think the first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to bring in our reference artwork. So I'm going to go back to our reference artwork here. I'm going to click Command A, Command C, and I'm going to come back and press Command V. So now we have our reference artwork in there, and what we can do is just lower the opacity to there. Actually, another thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring in a new layer, make sure that white is my background color, and I'm going to press Command Backspace, which will give me a white filled layer there, so I'm not looking over the transparency pattern in Photoshop, which is sort of just like a grey and white check. So I'm just going to get back up here. I could probably drop this down even further. It's just going to help us position our artwork to the right scale, which will just sort of save us time. So now let's have a look. So I'd say that the first thing that we need to bring in is the skull here. That's the it's the main subject matter. and it's the main sort of focal point. It's the biggest part of the artwork. So let's go ahead and bring that in. So just pressing F here to get out of full screen. We'll go into the skull, which is image 89 in the sample pack. So I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool to make a selection, which is this tool here. You can also just press L to bring that up as the keyboard shortcut. So I'm just going to point and click around the skull like so to make my selection. And when the selection is about to join and it will become a live selection, you'll notice that you get just a small circle next to the tool icon, and that's how you know it's going to be joined. So now that that's a live selection, you can see that indicated by sort of this marching ants pattern as it's referred to. So now I'm going to press Command C, and that will be Control C again if you're using a PC. And I'm going to press F to get back out into this screen mode so I can access the other canvases. So I'll go over to my new canvas here. I'm going to press Command V on the keyboard, and then I'm going to press Command T, and I'm going to just start scaling this up until it aligns with the skull underneath. So let's do that, and I think that looks about right. So do that, and then we'll get started bringing in the rows next, and we'll align that to the reference artwork in the background. So now let's bring in the rows, which is image 4 in the sample pack. So I'm going to press Command A to select the entire canvas, and I'm going to make sure that I've got the layer selected that has the image separated. And then to copy, I'm going to press Command C. I'm going to go back to my artwork canvas here, and I'm going to press Command V. What I'm going to do quickly, and just for best practices, is I'm going to press Control and then click on the layer here, and let's name our layers here, because once we start getting a few in, it'll start getting a bit confusing. So let's call this rows, and we will call this skull. Hang on. Here we are. There it is. Skull, and this will be reference. Cool. Okay, so now for the rows, let's reposition this. So let's just turn off the skull so we can see. Okay, so we can see here that we actually need to flip this image on a horizontal axis, as it's, I can see here that is what we've done. So let's go and press Command T to bring up the transform control. Let's right click this, and we will, or option click, sorry, and we can flip it on horizontal axis. And it looks to me like it's a little bit too big, and it also needs to be rotated clockwise a little. So let's try and match this up. I think that's still a bit big. Maybe might need to just rotate that out a little bit longer. Maybe a bit more. I think that's starting to look pretty good. I'm going to bring it down a little bit further. And it doesn't have to line up exactly. I mean, we're making a new artwork, and you don't have to follow this exactly either. I mean, you can definitely put your own spin on it, and I would encourage you to do so. But also, if you just want to follow along just to get the feel for how this artwork was made, of course, please feel free to do so. So I think this positioning is almost right. I'm just going to press enter to confirm that transform. And what I want to do is just zoom in and make sure that this branch here actually overhangs where this nose ends, because what we want is for it to look as though that the rose is growing out of the nose of the skull. So and we need sort of like a little bit of overlap here so that we can use a layer mask to cut away this section here so it looks more realistic, a more realistic effect, to make sure that it looks like that the rose is growing out of the nose of the skull. So let's do that now. So I'm going to apply a layer mask to this rose by clicking this icon here. And I want to make sure that when I select my brush, and I can get brush by selecting B on the keyboard, or if you come over to the tools panel here, you can click this icon. I want to make sure that I have black selected as my foreground color, and then make sure that my layer mask is selected, which is here. And if black is selected, then it should erase everything that's there. So I want to zoom in to make sure that this is accurate, and I'm just going to edge away at it. And if you're new to layer mask and you don't know how this works, I'll just give you a quick example. Say if you're editing here and then you accidentally slip, what you can do, the beauty of these, is that if you press X on your keyboard, or you switch your layer color here to white, you can then edge it back in. And this is a really handy tool, particularly when working with digital collage, particularly with like engravings for quite detailed sections that can be unforgiving, because you will inevitably make mistakes. And yeah, it's just a very handy tool. So let's zoom back out and see how that looks. Okay, cool. Okay, so if everybody gets to this point, and then we will stop there before we move on to the next section. So get your artwork looking as close to this as possible, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now what we want to do is create backgrounds for the images, because as you can see, because we removed the image from the background, there's nothing actually behind this image here, and we want to fill that in so that we get the differentiation between the skull and the rose. So I think the easiest one to start with will be the skull. Let's make sure that we've got this layer selected, and what I'm going to do is go to the wand tool, which is this tool here, and you can access that by pressing W on the keyboard. So make sure that you've got the same settings as me up here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click outside, and I'm not going to click in the image, I'm going to click outside it, because I want to make a selection around the image, and the best way to illustrate this is just to do it. So as you can see, I've got those marching ants pattern here, but what it's done is it's selected everything around the image. So let me just show you. I'm just going to create a new layer. I'm going to drag it behind the skull, and I'm just going to choose like a brighter color just so I can illustrate what's going on here. And as we know, if we want to backfill our color, we need to make sure that this red color that I've selected is in the back. And again, you can do that by pressing X. And now I'm going to press Command Backspace or Command Delete. So you can see that that is where our selection is, which is not what we want. So let's press Command Z to undo that. And what I want to do is inverse the selection. So let's go to Select, and we'll go to Inverse here. And if you want the shortcut, that's Command Shift I. So now we have the selection of just basically what would be inside the outline of the skull. So let's have a look here. Perfect. Now let's just zoom in. Yep. that looks good, just to make sure it's not overhanging. No, seems like it was quite a clean selection, so that is good. I'm just going to leave that red for now, just because it will just help us differentiate between the two layers, and later on we can start colorizing the artwork again and using the color palette that we see in our reference artwork. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat the process for the rose. So I'll turn off these two layers. I'm going to turn the rose on. We can see that the rose has a layer mask. We want to make sure that the layer mask isn't selected, and what we want to make sure is that the rose is selected. So that would be the layer mask selected. This is making sure that just the image is selected. So again, W for wand, and this one is going to be more difficult, but I'll walk you through how I would go about making the selection. So again, clicking outside of the rose. So I'm just going to zoom in, because this isn't going to be as clean of a selection, and there will be some sort of manual coloring that needs to be done. But let me just explain a little bit further about how this works. So the wand will make a selection of basically anything that's not like a closed space. So like you can see in here that this hasn't been selected, basically because there is sort of like a border of pixels outside it, and the selection can't get in. It's kind of almost like if you imagine that it's sort of like what it would work like if it was water and there was sort of like a barrier around it, it will sort of get into every crevice that it can of basically the color that you selected, which is white, until it hits a solid sort of perimeter. Maybe that's not the best analogy, but it's the best that I have for now. So what we need to do is start making selections of all these enclosed spaces, like this here, this space in here, here, and so forth. So the best way to do that is if you hold down Shift, and I'll just show you why that selection is still live. You'll see that you get a plus symbol next to your wand icon. So I'm just going to go over here, and I'm going to start selecting these other spaces. So here, 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 and here. So let's just go through and get a few more. I think there's quite a few in the stem here. Okay, are there any others? I think that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is just zoom out for a second, and what we need to do is inverse the selection again. So select, inverse. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to drag it underneath the rose. This time I'm going to choose a different color. I'm going to choose just any old sort of bright color. This purple will do. I'm going to press X on the keyboard to make sure that it's my background color. And I am going to press Command Delete, and then I'm going to do Apple D to see what this looks like. So as you can see, it's not perfect, and that's because with the water analogy I was trying to use, that there will be gaps in here, and basically it has gone through and basically like selected everything it can until it hits that perimeter of black pixels. So what you have to do, and there's not really any quick way for this, is press X again to make sure that that's your foreground color, and then basically you want to get your brush. I think that you'd probably want to use like a hard round brush for this, and you basically just have to get in there. It's probably the easiest way to do it, and you just have to paint it in. So it may take a little while, but I mean, that is just art. Sometimes it is a little bit painstaking and a bit tedious, but it will all be worth it in the end. So let's just go ahead and color in the rose, and then we can move forward from there. The rows all colored in. Let's turn the skull back on, and we can start bringing in some of the other elements that are going to make up our artwork. First, I'm just going to make sure, I'm just going to group these layers together so it just becomes, so it's like a neater way to work. Because once we start having a few more layers in, it can get a little bit complicated. So I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to select both the rows layers, and I'm going to press Command G to put them into a group. And I'm just going to double click it there, and I am going to title that rows. And I'm going to do the same for the skull. So hold down Shift, select both layers, press Command G, double click, skull. Okay. There we go. That's got both of those in there. Great. So next, let's turn off these two layers just so we can see what we want to bring in next. Let's get up the reference artwork by making sure that this eye icon is selected there. What next? I think that we should bring in the watch, the stopwatch. So let's just opt out here, and where is it? There it is. So the watch is image 211. So again, I'm going to press, make sure that I've got the layer selected that we removed the background from. I'm going to press Command A, and then I'm going to press Command C, then I'm going to go back to our document, Command V. Okay, and then I'm just going to bring it on the layer panel and just drag it above the two groups that we have there. I'm going to press Command T so I can transform the size of it, and again I'm just going to go up to the edge of the right hand corner of the transform box here, and I click, and I'm going to drag down to scale that down until we get to the right size. So let's have a look. It's still a bit too big. It's just going to be a process of just sort of scaling it in and out just to make sure it's the right size or thereabouts. And again, it doesn't have to be precise, but this is just going to make life easier for us if it is for the time being. So enter to confirm the transform, and now let's turn off the reference layer. And before we turn on the other layers, let's do what we did previously, and we are going to have to paint in the background of this image, similar to what we just did with the rose and the skull. Exactly what we just did. So let's get our wand tool. So again, it's over here in the toolbar, or you can press W on the keyboard. And outside of the image, we will click. And what does our selection look like? Let's zoom in a bit here. Actually, it looks not too bad. We will have to do some painting in again, but it's not too bad. So again, as we remember, if there is an area that's completely closed off with these black pixels, it won't penetrate the inside, which we need. So we want to hold down of this section here. So we're going to hold down Shift again, so we get that plus symbol next to the icon, and we're going to click inside there. So what we need to do again is inverse the selection. So select, inverse, and then we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to drag it underneath the image of the stopwatch, and let's select a different color. Let's choose this sort of bright aqua color. You can choose whatever you want, and again pressing X on the keyboard to get that to our background color, and then pressing Command Delete to backfill on the keyboard. And now let's press Command D to deselect this live selection here, and let's zoom in, and let's just get the brush tool up, pressing X again so it's the foreground color that we can paint with, and let's just brush that in. It's pretty good, not too much work to do, not anywhere near the amount of the rows, so that is good. Great. And now that is done, so let's rename our artwork so we don't get confused. So I'm just going to call this watch, and I'm going to call this watch BG for background. Cool. Okay, and then select both, Command G, double click, rename it watch. Okay, so now let's turn on our layers and we can see it starting to come together. Okay, so that looks good. Let's stop there for now and then we will start the next process. Okay, so now let's turn off our layers here, turn on our reference artwork and see what we should bring in next. I think that we should bring in this butterfly here. So let's get out of this document and let's go to image number 91, which is the butterfly. Let's make sure again that you have the layer selected where you separated the image. I'm going to press Command A, Command C. I'm going to go back to our artwork and we are going to create, sorry, we don't have to create a new layer, we're just going to paste this in and then we're going to do what we did just before with the watch. We're going to position this butterfly and try and align it with the reference artwork that we have here. So again, going to the edge of the transform box, and you can bring up the transform box by pressing Command T, and we're just going to scale this up and down. Let's have a look. Just going to turn this on and off so we can see, so it needs to sort of come back a bit. I think the scale is about right, it's more just the positioning that needs to be adjusted. I think that looks pretty good, maybe a bit too big actually, so I'm just going to scale it down a bit again, just reposition. I think that's looking pretty good. Yeah, happy with that. Okay, so let's turn off the reference artwork, and again we are going to make a selection to backfill the color behind this butterfly. So what we need to do again is get our wand tool. So again, it is in the toolbar here, or you can press W again to bring that up. So let's see how the selection goes this time. So clicking outside of the image, it looks pretty good. Let's zoom in here. There's going to be a few areas around here that need to be touched up, but for the most part that should be pretty quick to fill in. So zoom out. Again, we're going to inverse the selection. We're going to go down. We're going to select this bright green color will do. And again, we're going to create a new layer, drag it below, and we're going to press X on our keyboard to make sure that the green is the background color, and we're going to press Command Delete. And again, if you're using a PC, that will be Control, so whenever I say Command, just replace that for Control if you're using PC. So here we are. So let's zoom in a bit, and yep, not too bad, but we'll just have to brush in a few areas. So again, pressing X to bring the green color here to the foreground, pressing B to bring up the brush tool, or coming to the toolbar here to select brush, and just simply brushing that in. And I'll just hit these areas here and here, and just go around. And you know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but luckily, you know, working digitally, it really allows you to sort of go back and fix up any mistakes that you've made. So, I mean, it really is quite a forgiving medium. So, just getting in here, here. Cool. Okay, just a few little bits here. You know, you don't have to be precise, but the more accurate you get, sometimes I do find that the more sort of realistic and more believable your sort of like assemblage can sort of become, your collage can sort of become. But you know, you might not want to go for that look, but for this particular image we do. So being as precise as we can is good. Okay, so again, let's rename our artwork. So here, okay, so butterfly and butterfly BG for background, and let's select both layers, and we're going to press Command G to group them, double click, butterfly. Okay, so let's zoom out, and I'm doing that by just pressing Command minus, and you can zoom in by pressing Command plus, Command minus. And I'm just going to turn on our other images so we can see where we're at. So one thing I can see right away that needs to be changed is that in our reference artwork, the butterfly sits underneath the petal of this rose, and let's just confirm that. Yeah, it does. Let me just... Yeah, we can see that wing definitely sits underneath that. So let's just drop that back down to 30, and I'll turn this off. So let's grab this group here and drag it underneath the rose. Perfect. Okay, cool. Okay, well, we'll leave that there for the minute, and then we'll pick up with the next step. Okay, so let's see what we want to bring into our artwork next. So let's turn off all of our groups here. We'll turn on our reference artwork. Just going to up the opacity for a moment. And I would say that we want to bring in these wings. So I'm just going to pop this back down to 30. I'm going to turn this off, and then we're going to go into image 153, which is where I got these from. And this is actually from an old Orbit Dura wood engraving, which is from one of our new releases, the Orbit Dura collection, if you're interested. So we don't need to select the whole image as we have previously. What we need to do is just take a section. So I'm going to get the polygonal lasso tool again. So over here in our toolbar, I'm going to select that, and I'm just going to again point and click to make the selection, and then I'm going to press enter just to make that a live selection, then Command C, and then I'm going to go back into our canvas here, and I'm going to press Command V. Okay, so let's just have a look. I'm going to turn that off for a second, put this back, put this reference artwork back on, just have a slightly better look. So, okay. So it does keep in these wings here. So I think what we need to do is we need to erase this part of the image. So I'm just going to get my eraser tool, and I'm just going to, I'm not going to go too close in here because it's all going to get hidden behind the skull, but I need to be a little bit more precise up here. So just making sure I'm not erasing any of the parts of the artwork that we really need. So sort of going to follow that contour just there. None of this is going to be visible, so it doesn't matter too much, but good to work clean. Okay, so now that we've got the wings isolated, let's turn on our reference artwork again, and let's drop the opacity down to 30%. Actually, maybe even 20, just so I can clearly see the wings that we've isolated here on top of it. So I can see that they definitely need to be made bigger. So what I'm going to do is press Command T, and you can see that they need to be angled as well, and the size needs to be increased. I'd say it's looking something like that. It's just going to be a matter of just slowly just trying to find the right angle and the right size, maybe slightly bigger. Just nudging that back across. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, let's just go with that for now. I think that's close enough. So let's turn off our reference artwork, and again we need to backfill the color behind the wings. So we need to do what we did previously, which is get our wand tool, which is W on the keyboard or over here in the toolbar. We're going to click outside of the artwork to make a selection. So you can already see here there's definitely probably some gaps in these lines here, which is allowing the selection to enter into the artwork. So there will be a little bit of sort of manual painting that needs to be done, but it's a fairly straightforward shape, so it shouldn't take too long. So again, let's create a new layer, drag it underneath the wings. We'll go select, inverse, and then we want another color that we can differentiate between all the others. So let's go for sort of like a bright yellow. I don't think we've got that yet. Again, pressing X on the keyboard to make sure that that's our backfill color, and pressing Command Delete. Okay, so we can see that there's quite a bit that needs to be painted in. So let's paint that in. I'm going to get my brush tool, again pressing X to make sure that yellow is my foreground color, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint that in. So I won't watch you watch me paint all of this in, so go ahead and complete that and I'll do the same, and then we can get started with the next step. That done, let's go ahead and actually we'll name our artwork quickly. So this can be wing, and this wing background. Okay, and we'll group them. Double click to rename. Wing, call this wing 1 because we're going to have 2. What I will do now is I'm going to drag this group onto this layer here to duplicate it. And I'm just going to double click that. I'm going to call this wing, actually probably wing left is probably a better name, and this can be wing right. So I'm going to take the left wing, I'm going to Command T, and then I'm going to flip it horizontally. I'm just going to drag it over, and then I'm going to turn on our reference artwork and see where it actually needs to be positioned. So let's have a look. I'm going to turn this off. So I can see that this needs to line up here. So just pressing V, my move tool, and just, holding down. I need to select both layers here. So there we are. And then holding Shift just to slide across into place. So I think that is pretty good. Okay, cool. So let's turn off the reference artwork, and let's turn on our other layers and see how this is looking. Yep, it's looking pretty good. So there's a few things that I can see. We need to add, this watch sort of looks a bit out of place without a shadow here, so we're going to have to add a shadow. So that is what we will add next. so let's add in the shadow. So I'm going to create a new layer at the very bottom because I want this to run underneath and meet up with the shadow of the skull, because the light source is coming from the right hand side. So I want to paint it in this way and it to go under the skull also. I also think that maybe the watch is sitting just like a little bit too high. It kind of looks like it's floating a bit, so I'm just going to just grab those two layers, and I know this doesn't align with our reference artwork, but always good to adjust. I think that looks a bit more natural. Excuse me. Okay, cool. So let's make sure that black is our background color. And what I want to do now is go to brush, and let me see, I've got some brushes that I made, which is actually, do you know what, I'm not going to use brushes that I've made. I'm going to just use a brush that everyone has, so we're all creating the same thing. So I'm going to get a soft edged brush. So let me just show you what I mean, just so you can see one that's sort of got a soft, like, feathered edge. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the blending mode to dissolve, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down and I'm just going to grab that here. I'm just going to paint this in. I know it looks a bit messy at the moment, but I want to run this across the whole sort of front edge and sort of down a little bit as well, because it will look unnatural to have two different sort of style shadows. So I want to make sure that it sort of joins up here too. And again, I'm just going to sort of keep running it under there. And then we can use our layer mask actually. So again, I'm going to put a layer mask on, which is this icon here. And if we have black selected, that is going to erase whatever we've just painted. So I can do that, and then I can just start to just refine that shadow, because it's far too long there, and it should be shorter, and it should extend as it goes out. So let's zoom back. Still looks a bit wonky here, so I think that's looking a lot better. Just going to, yeah, I think that's looking good. So I think that looks a lot more natural now, but compared to what it did previously. And let's just turn it off. Yeah, that looks a lot better. Okay, cool. So the next thing that we will do is we will bring in the frame. Okay, so let's go to image 43 and bring in the frame. So let's make sure we've got the layer selected where we've separated the image from the background. We're going to press Command A to select everything on that layer, press Command C, and then we're going to go back to our working canvas, and we are going to we'll go and just press Command V just for the time being and just get it in there. Okay, cool. Let's turn off for the time being our other layers here and this shadow that we pasted in. I'm just going to quickly rename this so we have it here. Shadow. And I'm even going to turn that off just for now. Let's put on our reference. Okay, so again, we're going to need to increase the scale of this. So Command T, I'm going to try and just zoom in here and just try and align, there we are, align the artwork with the frame of the reference artwork, and then I'm just going to scale that out think that is pretty close. Yeah, I think that looks good. And press enter to commit that transform. Okay, so now let's turn off the frame for a second. I just want to up the opacity just to point something out. Okay, so one thing that I can see is that in this artwork I have designed it so that the rose goes behind and in front of the frame, and this is kind of just like a cool little trick just to make the image a little bit more dynamic, because sometimes if you have all the artwork just within a frame it can look a bit flat, but having a few elements on the page escaping the frame sort of, it gives it a greater sense of just depth and dynamism, I think. So I think it's a nice trick to incorporate, and yeah, it's something that we're going to definitely replicate right now. So let's turn this off, we'll turn the frame on, and we'll also turn the rose on. So one thing that we'll have to do is just get in here and make sure that we've got the rose selected. Actually, before we do anything else, I'm also just going to include a layer mask on this backfill section as well. So we've got a layer mask on the actual engraving and one also on the backfill. I'm just going to hide this for a second, and what I'm going to do is just get the polygonal lasso tool. So again, over here in the toolbar, or you can press L, and I'm just going to click, and I'm just going to zoom in and just carefully follow this line down, just making sure that I don't go outside of the black area if possible, because if I do, then it will kind of just sort of ruin the effect of what we're trying to achieve. So I'm just going to zoom out a bit. That should be enough, and then I'm just going to go across, click up, over, and press enter, and then I'm going to turn on the rose. So now I'm going to make sure that I have the layer mask selected. I'm going to make sure that black is my backfill color, because as we know, when we're using a layer mask, painting in black or backfilling in black will erase the image, but it is good because we also know that we can paint it back in, so it gives us that leeway to be able to make errors. So we have black as our backfill color, which we can see here. We've got our layer mask selected, so if we press Command backspace, we should be able to see what's underneath, which should just be the purple backfill, which it is. Great. And now if we click onto the layer mask for the purple backfill, we should be able to erase that. So that looks good. So now I think that looks pretty good. Let's turn on the other elements to make sure. Okay, so the wings need to go below the below the frame, because that's how it is in the reference artwork. Yep. Okay, so let's grab both of these and drag it underneath. Cool. Let's turn these on, and as we can see, what we still need to do also is create a backfill for the frame. So let's turn this off. Let's quickly control click this layer and rename it, just so we know what we're working with. Frame. Okay, cool. And let's create a new layer, and we'll try with the wand. So we'll make sure that we've got this selected, Doesn't really look like it's going to work that well. It kind of seeps in. So the wand might not be the best tool for the job because this is square and it's probably not going to be that difficult to trace. I might just use the polygonal lasso tool again. So we'll go up into our toolbar and select that, and then I'm just going to zoom in and I am going to trace that along here. Probably need to zoom in and be a bit more precise actually. Okay, and then I'm going to just come down here. I'm just going to do it in sort of sections. I'm going to backfill it in sections until the whole frame is filled. So I'm just going to go here, go up. Okay, and now I'm going to choose another bright color. Let's just choose this orange. Make sure that we've got the layer that we made underneath for it selected, and I'll press X to make sure that that's my backfill color. Command delete. Okay, and I'm just going to zoom out for a moment, and I'm just going to repeat that process until the whole frame is filled. That filled in. Let's go ahead and turn on all our elements and see how it looks. Okay, looking good. So the next thing we need to bring in is our leaves that are falling and sort of like cascading down from the rows. So that will be the next part that we tackle. So let's get stuck into that now. Okay, so let's just turn off all of our layers quickly and bring up our reference artwork so we can see where these leaves are. Okay, cool. So what we want to do is go into image 34 and we want to isolate some of these leaves here on the stem of this rose. So let me just have a look. Okay, so that one here, I'm pretty sure is this leaf here. So let's go ahead and get our polygonal lasso tool. So over here in the toolbar, and we'll just select this leaf, and we will copy and paste that into our current document, and I'm going to paste that at the top of everything because there's nothing that masks or goes over the top of these leaves, so these can be at the very top of the layers. So let's rotate this and scale this down. And again, this doesn't have to be like completely accurate, but I'm going to be as accurate as I can just for this example. And you can sort of have them fall as you like, it's really up to you. So I am going to just control click and rename this layer leaf 1, and I'm going to go back and let's have a look for this leaf here. So there's layer 34, so I think that might be this one. So I'm going to Command D, so we deselect the selection that we had, and I'm going to again use the polygonal lasso tool to make a selection by pointing and clicking and pressing enter to commit the selection, pressing Command C, going back to our document, Command V, and I can see, let's just quickly rename this so I know which leaf it is. This can be leaf 2, and it needs to be rotated and scaled down. Scaled up a little bit more actually. pretty good. Now let's get this final leaf here. So back into image 34. Actually, which one is it? Okay. Look for the shading here, that will help identify it. Which I think might be this one here. Doesn't really matter actually, it can be any. Let's just take this one. Command C. Command V. And let's have a look. Not sure if that's exactly the same, but let's just use this one. And let's scale it down to somewhere pretty close. That looks pretty good. And let's turn off the references. And I am just gonna, again, control click, rename leaf 3. So let's go back up to leaf 1, which is our leaf at the top here. We want to create a backfill color, so let's choose, just for the moment, just a bright blue, and I'll create a layer underneath, and I'll get my wand tool by pressing W, or coming here in the toolbar, again clicking outside of the artwork, zoom in there so you can sort of see where that selection is taking place. Sorry, excuse me. There we are. Now we've got the selection there. I wasn't on the correct layer. And then we need to inverse the selection again. So we'll go select, inverse. We'll make sure that we have our new bright blue color there that we've chosen as the backfill color. We'll make sure on the right layer here. And we'll press Command Delete. You can see that hasn't worked too well, but what I will do is just move the blue to my foreground color again, and I'm just going to quickly just brush that in. I just recalled we've got the brush selected that we created the shadow for, so that's all good. Let's go back to a hard brush and let's change dissolve to normal. There we go. I'm just going to quickly brush this in. It should only take a second. Okay, cool. And do you know what? Just the top of that leaf actually looks just like a little bit unnatural, so I'm just going to get an eraser and just sort of round it off a little bit there. And I'm just going to do the same for the bit underneath. Get rid of this. Okay, cool. And I'm going to rename that layer, and that will be leaf 1 BG, and I'm going to select them both, group them, double click, leaf 1, and grouping all the layers just keeps things just neat and tidy basically. And stops you sort of getting confused later on. If you have sort of a 1,000 layers sort of in your panel there, it can get a bit overwhelming. Okay, cool. So same process again. Selecting the wand tool, selecting outside. We want to inverse that selection. We want to create a new layer and drag it beneath. We want to make sure that blue is our backfill color, and we want to press Command Delete. That's worked really nicely, so that's perfect. I think I can only see one bit in there that needs to be touched up. Perfect. Going to quickly rename that layer. Why isn't that working? Here we are. Okay, so leaf 2 background. Command G to group them. Double click, leaf 2, same process for leaf 3. Where is it? Okay, cool. And now we want to get the wand tool, click outside the artwork, select inverse, or you can also press Command Shift I to, that's the shortcut for inverse. New layer, drag underneath, make sure that backfill is our backfill color is blue. Command backspace. So we can see that we need to paint in a bit there. So we'll get our brush tool. We'll just deselect by Command D first, and then we will make sure that our foreground color is selected. Just reduce the size of the brush a bit there, and we'll just quickly paint that in. Cool. Okay, so let's just zoom out, and let's turn on our other elements in the page and see how this is looking. Shadow. Cool. Okay, well, I mean, the colors look awful, but I think we've got all the elements on the page now, and we can start coloring the artwork. So let's get into that now. To start colorizing the artwork, let's first turn off all our page elements here, and let's make some new swatches of the color palette in this artwork. So believe there's only 3 colors in this artwork, but let's just bring up our swatches here. Let's get our eyedropper by pressing I, and let's just make sure that we're zoomed in and we get the right color. So let's just go over to our swatches, hit new, go OK, and then let's go to the gray, this lighter gray. Let's select that, select that gray there, which I actually believe is the same as this. I think it just looks a bit darker, but just in case it's not, I'm just going to add another one there. It is a bit darker. Okay, cool. So we're working with, it's a 4-color artwork. Cool. So let's grab our reference artwork. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to turn this one off. I'm going to drag it all the way up to the top, and I am just going to press Command T on the keyboard, and I'm just going to make it a bit smaller, just so I have a reference for myself there. I'm going to turn the rest of the page elements back on. Cool. Turn that off. Okay, so let's start with our background color. So that is this color here. So this is sort of the mid-tone of the grays. So I'm going to make sure that it is our backfill color. So X again for backfill. I'm going to go to this layer at the very bottom, and I'm going to press Command Delete. So that is there. So then next up, let's go to our frame, and that's easy to find because we've labeled all our layers, and we'll go to the frame background. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to go to color overlay. And what I can do is I can just click up here, and I can see that the frame is the lighter gray. So I'm just going to go in here, select the light gray, and I am going to press OK, and that's done. I can see that the wings and the skull are the same color, and actually the butterfly as well. So let's do those. Let's go to the skull. Let's go to the background, the backfill of that. Let's select the gray. Okay, so that's selected that now. So let's go to the wings, the left wing, color overlay, and it's already preloaded that gray in there, so perfect. And the right wing, double click, color overlay, perfect. And also for the backfill of the butterfly, so let's go here, butterfly, color overlay. Cool, that looks good. So let's have a look. Let's do the leaves are easiest. The rose is going to be most complex. It's not too difficult, but there is as a two-step process. So let's do the leaves first. So let's close up this group here. We'll go to let's go to leaf 3, which we've not grouped, which we will do now. Double click leaf 3, and I'll just quickly rename this layer to leaf 3 background, which we want to work with right now, and that was the one at the bottom here. So let's go to color overlay, and let's select the pink color that we have. Cool, and we'll do the same for leaf 2, color overlay. It's already preloaded the color that we used previously, and for leaf 1. Okay, cool. So let's zoom out and have a look at our reference. So the watch is the darker color around the outside, and then it has the lighter gray on the inner face. So let's do that. So we'll do the outer darker gray first. So let's scroll down and find our watch. There it is. Okay, so color overlay, and that is the dark gray. So we'll select that. And then what we want to do is create a new layer on top of it, which is this lighter gray. So we'll select that. Come over to our panel and select that. And there's numerous ways you could do that. I think what I'm going to do is just select the elliptical marquee tool. I'm going to hold down Option and Shift from the center of the watch there, and I'm just going to pull out. And you know, this is drawing a perfect circle, but this is an old engraving and it's probably not perfect. So I'm just going to make a selection for the time being. I'm going to make sure that the background is filled, and we can fill in the selection and then tweak it to sort of make sure that it fits the face appropriately and fills all of the space and doesn't sort of intersect the darker gray. So let's just press Command Delete, and we'll just zoom in here. I'm going to press Command T, and I'm just going to press, sorry, I'm going to right click, and I am going to go into Distort, and then that will allow me just to sort of grab parts of the circle here that we've made with the marquee tool and just sort of manipulate it into place. Yeah, it's looking fairly good. Yeah, I think that looks good. Let's press enter. Yeah, I think that looks great. So that's done. Okay, so now we need to do the rose, which is a little bit more complex because we've got the stem in the darker color, then obviously the flower itself is in this light pink. I think the easiest way to do this is to start by having the first backfill color the darkest. So let's go to our rose. And let's duplicate. No, sorry, let's not duplicate. Let's first go to color overlay, and we'll select this darker gray color here. Cool, so let's zoom out. So it's starting to look a little bit more like what we have. What we can do now is we can duplicate this layer by this layer I mean the layer that we just changed the color overlay on, the background of the rose. So I'll grab that, I'll drag it onto this icon here, which is basically like a page with a plus sign. That didn't work, but let's do that. There we are. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the layer underneath it, going to go back into color overlay, and I'm going to select this light pink color from our swatches. And if we go back to the layer on top of it, we'll notice that we have a layer mask that we created earlier. And if we remember that we can erase part of that image by bringing up our brush tool, making sure that our foreground color that we've selected is black, and we can paint away what's on top of it, and it'll expose what's behind it, which will be the pink color that we just did the color overlay on. So what we can do is just get in there and we can paint away, essentially mask that grey color out and expose the pink below. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that now, and once I've finished all of it, we'll get started on reviewing any final tweaks that need to be made. Now that that rose is all coloured in, we are done. If you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you enjoyed the final product. Just to let you guys know that we are going to be bringing out new tutorials, hopefully every week, if not definitely every second week. And if you're not part of our mailing list, please do join, because that's where we're going to be releasing them, also on YouTube. So if you do want to follow along, please be sure to follow. And if you want to find out more about what we do, you can head to vaulteditions.com. There you can find our image archive packs and a whole range of different articles. I think there's probably hundreds now on various topics to do with art and design. So please go and check them out. And yeah, we will be in touch with you guys soon. Okay, bye.